Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're exploring the architectural landscape of London, Ontario. We've got a few interesting sources lined up. There's London, Ontario architecture, historic to modern, which gives us a great timeline.
Right, covers a lot of ground.
And then architectural illustration and perspective, 1997-2006. This one has a curious note about being inspired to paint it again. We'll touch on that.
Interesting, that connection between the building and the art.
Exactly. And finally, to bring it up to date, some info from Somkiat Saelek Photography Services, a local photographer capturing London's buildings today.
So a good mix, history, art, and the contemporary view.
Yeah. So the goal here is really to give you a solid understanding of how London's architecture has evolved, from the old foundations right up to the modern stuff and, how we see and represent these buildings.
It's quite neat how these different angles, the book, the illustrations, the photography, they sort of weave together. We're not just looking at bricks and mortar.
No, exactly.
It's also about perception, how things were documented. Adds another layer, I think.
Totally. Okay, so let's dig into those historical roots first. Our main architecture source calls London the Forest City,
Right.
which is nice, and talks about its rich heritage. And it points us straight to Eldon House, 1834.
Wow, yeah. That's London's oldest house, right?
It is Georgian and Regency styles.
Yeah.
You can almost feel the 19th century looking at it, can't you?
Yeah.
The design choices tell a story.
Absolutely. Eldon House is like a tangible link to London's early days. That symmetry, the proportions you see in Georgian and Regency, it wasn't just looks.
Yeah.
It often symbolized, order, maybe social stability, and practical things too, like materials, how the house faced for light and warmth. That all shaped the look.
Makes sense. Then, moving along the timeline, we get St. Paul's Cathedral, 1846.
Ah, yes, the Gothic Revival one.
Yeah, quite a different feel. It mentions a big tower, pinnacles, stained glass.
Yeah.
And get this, 2 windows signed by Tiffany.
Tiffany. Really?
Yeah.
That's a significant detail. Connects London to, a huge name in American art glass.
It does stand out.
And that Gothic Revival style itself, popular mid-century, it looked back to medieval times for inspiration.
Right, the pointed arches and all that.
Exactly. The height, the verticality, it was meant to feel grand, maybe spiritual. And adding Tiffany glass just layers on that craftsmanship, shows they were tapped into wider artistic trends.
And we can't forget Old East Village. The source says it's the oldest neighborhood. And it's apparently got a mix of styles, which really shows how the city just grew over time, building by building.
That's a great point. Walking through Old East Village is like flipping through an architectural history book.
Yeah?
You see the changes in how things were built, the materials they had, what looks were popular, all in one place. It's a living record.
Now let's shift a bit to materials and styles that really define the certain eras. The London, Ontario architecture source really highlights yellow brick, late 1800s.
Ah, the yellow brick, yes.
Apparently London got known for it. Local clay was the key.
It really was. That local yellow brick wasn't just convenient. It became, part of London's identity back then.
Gave it a distinct look.
For sure. Probably fostered a bit of local pride, too. And you still see so much of it. It really adds to the city's character.
And building on that era, Victorian architecture. Lots of it in London, apparently. Known for being, ornate. Complex roof lines, lots of detail.
Very much so. The Victorian era, that was a time of big industrial growth, economic expansion.
Right.
And the architecture often showed that off. The fancy details, the different shapes. It was partly about displaying wealth, but also showing off new building techniques and the skill involved.
Okay, then the source points to the Dominion Public Building, calls it a key example of Beaux-Arts style, and notes restoration work is happening.
Yes, the Beaux-Arts, that style often feels very grand, very official.
Yeah, it does have that feel, civic importance.
Exactly. Symmetry, large scale, classical details, often used for government buildings, banks, libraries. To project authority, permanence, restoring it shows it's still seen as important.
There's another one mentioned too, the Canada Life Building, near Victoria Park. Also Beaux-Arts.
Ah, right. Designed by John M. Moore.
Yeah, symmetrical facade, classical details again. Similar vibes to the Dominion Public Building. It's interesting how one style pops up like that.
It is. It shows that Beaux-Arts was really influential during a certain period of London's growth. But even within the style, each building has its own touches, adding to the city's, overall architectural mix.
Okay, let's jump forward. Modern developments. The big one mentioned is Centro.
Right, the tallest building.
135.3 meters, 40 stories. Quite the symbol of, modern London and urban growth A real contrast to Eldon House.
A huge contrast. Centro represents that shift towards modern materials, height, a different set of priorities.
Yeah.
It reflects London's ongoing story as a city, changing needs. It's a very visible marker of the present day.
And this kind of connects back to that illustration source, architectural illustration and perspective. Remember the note about being inspired to paint it again?
Yes, I found that intriguing.
It makes you wonder, what was it about London's buildings that sparked that? Maybe the detail on a Victorian house or the sheer presence of a Beaux-Arts building?
Could be anything, really. That's the thing about architectural illustration or any art inspired by architecture. It's not just copying.
Right, it's an interpretation.
Exactly. It's about capturing a feeling, the form, the light. So being inspired to paint it again suggests a real visual connection to London's architecture. It shows how buildings can be muses.
And bringing that idea right up to today, we have the info about Somkiat Saelek photography services, based right here in London, specializing in capturing beautiful and unique moments of projects. So that's the modern way of documenting architecture, isn't it? Through photography.
Absolutely. Photography is huge now in how we see and remember buildings, and that focus on beautiful and unique moments.
It sounds like an artistic approach, much like the illustrators, just, with a camera instead of a brush.
Yeah, different tools, same idea of capturing something special.
Pretty much.
Okay, one last key point from the London, Ontario architecture source. It gives a statistic. London's downtown core has over 500 heritage buildings.
500? That's substantial.
It really positions London as architecturally significant in Ontario, and it mentions the city's commitment to preservation, conservation efforts, heritage designations.
That figure really drives home the depth of London's architectural history, and the fact that the city is actively trying to preserve it, that shows they recognize the value culturally, historically, aesthetically, for us now and for the future.
So wrapping this up, it's been quite the journey. We started way back with Eldon House, Georgian, and Regency styles.
The early days. Move through the Victorian era, that yellow brick, the ornate details. Then the grandeur of Beaux-Arts with buildings like Dominion Public and Canada Life.
Right, those civic statements.
And landed in the present with the scale of Centro. We saw how local materials mattered, how specific styles left their mark.
And we also touched on how these buildings aren't just structures, but things that inspire art, whether it's illustration or modern photography.
Yeah.
It reminds you that how we see and document the city shapes our understanding just as much as the buildings themselves.
Definitely. So here's something to maybe think about after this. How do these shifts in architectural styles, from Georgian to Victorian to Beaux-Arts to modern, how do they reflect bigger changes?
Like in society, technology, culture.
Exactly. What stories do these buildings tell about the times they were built in? And looking ahead, what might future architecture in London look like? What stories will it tell?
And how will things like photography or whatever comes next shape how people understand our current built environment down the road?
Good questions to ponder. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive today.